So the A7 IV, I finally have it in my hands here, and I've had it for the past week. Today we're going to go over the differences with the A7 III and whether I think it's worth the upgrade. It's pretty obvious that it is, but we're going to do it anyway. So I've come out here to sit in the van because the kids are running around like crazy, and it's just nice being out. Ever since the A7 Mark III came out, I've owned probably 3 or 4 of them, I think. I switch cameras a fair bit, mostly because I like to own stuff that I'm reviewing, and I just do it. I don't know why, there's no explanation for it. But the whole time I've owned A7 IIIs, it was a really amazing camera, but it did have its flaws. And now that the A7 Mark IV, which I have in my hands here, is out, it's fixed pretty much all of my complaints, and as far as I'm concerned, is one of the best, if not the best, value for money hybrid camera you can buy today. Before we get into this, I just want to let you guys know this is just my first initial thoughts. I've had it for a week, but I can't process the raw files or anything like that yet. So expect a full review once I've been able to edit the raw files, and then at that point I'll upload some for you guys to play with yourself. Obviously this camera is a pre-production model, but it does have the latest 1.0 firmware on it, which was uploaded to the camera just before I picked it up. So I think a lot of previous reviews on YouTube were using the beta software, whereas this has the official 1.0 software on there. So just something to note. I never used it with the beta software, so I don't know what the difference is, but let's get into it. So the first thing I noticed obviously is that the A7 IV has the new body. So it's the same body as the A9 Mark II, A7R4. It has the flip out screen just like the A7S III, and I think for most people that's going to be a pretty welcome change. The other major differences with the body is it has much better buttons and dials, so when you're pressing the buttons it actually feels like you're pressing a button now, where the A7 III buttons were just almost flush with the body. It was just a little bit odd. But yeah, and they've put the record button on top of the camera, and the biggest thing for me is that it has the new menu system combined with the dials being separated, so it has photo and video separate to the auto and manual controls. Now the reason that is really important for hybrid shooters, including the new menu, is because you can go in and choose what settings you want to save when you switch between photo and video mode. So what that means is that I can now use picture profiles a lot faster and a lot easier without going into custom settings or anything like that. So I can be shooting photos and then quickly switch to video mode, and I'm straight ready to go in S-Log3 with the exposure compensation that I have set. And yeah, it's just a much faster camera in terms of hybrid shooting, especially if you are using the CF Express cards. I have one in here now which Sony gave me with it, and it's so much faster. There's almost no delay whatsoever. So I can burst off like 10 photos, no problem at all, and then smash record and it will start recording straight away. Whereas with the A7 III, you could burst off like 10 photos and you'd have to wait for a little bit, even with the fastest SD cards you could get, before you could press the record button. And it wasn't a deal breaker, but it was just a little bit annoying, especially when other cameras were a bit faster in that category. So like I said, being able to switch modes with the dial on the front of the camera, and it becomes second nature after a while. You don't have to look at it or anything like that. It just, yeah, it's a much more pleasant experience, and it makes shooting picture profiles possible for me when I'm shooting photo and video at the same time. For a lot of people that's not really going to make sense, but for wedding photographers, you know what I mean. With the kind of fast-paced nature of it, you really need to have something that's really snappy and doesn't have any delay or anything. It has the full-size HDMI port, which for me is really great because I use a monitor when I'm recording in the studio, and it's just a really helpful thing to have in my opinion. Now it has 422 10-bit color. You can actually use S-Log3 and it looks really epic. It looks pretty much the same as my A7S III, other than the A7S III having a bit of an advantage in low light performance with video. In terms of photo colors, I can kind of give you an opinion, but I can only really look at JPEGs, so it definitely looks better than the A7 III. It looks much more similar to like the A7R4 in terms of colors, so that's a good step in the right direction for me. Obviously the A7 IV has 33 megapixels versus 24 megapixels on the A7 III, and that's a pretty welcome upgrade. I think that's about perfect in my opinion for a wedding shooter or anything like that. Probably anybody really. 33 megapixels is excellent. It enables you to crop in quite a bit more than 24 megapixels. You could use the APS-C mode in RAW with this camera like I used to use with my A7R4s and A7R3s, but it does give you quite a small file. But nevertheless, you can crop and post quite a lot with 33 megapixels. One of the really big complaints I had with the A7 III was the rear screen and the viewfinder. Not so much the viewfinder, but this viewfinder is much better than the A7 III's, and the rear screen has a huge upgrade. So it's still by far not the best LCD screen on the market, like other camera brands out there at the moment, but now it works perfectly. The colors are good, the sharpness is a little bit better, and you can, more importantly, you can expose properly with this LCD screen, where the A7 III screen, I just found everything went pink and overexposed when it wasn't actually overexposed. So it was just a little bit uncomfortable to use for me. It was just kind of an annoyance, I think, and that's been improved massively. Could Sony screens still be better? Yep, for sure, but this one works fine. Stabilization on paper doesn't seem like it's that much better, but I've definitely noticed it's a little bit better when you're talking about video. Not as good as the active stabilization on the A7S III, it doesn't have that, but yeah, I do definitely notice an upgrade over the A7 III stabilization. Another big difference I noticed with this camera is the autofocus system, and that's in photo and video. I own an A9 Mark II and an A7S III. I've owned, like I said, A7 IIIs, A9I, A7R4, all the Sony cameras, I've owned all of them. And I've also used the Sony A1 pretty extensively. I've used it at a wedding and engagement shoots, so I have a really good grasp on how that one performs as well. This may sound like a bit of a bold claim, but the focus on this A7 IV I think is at least as good as the A9 Mark II, if not maybe slightly better, but that's up to debate still. I'll definitely confirm that in my real world test. The autofocus performance is a massive jump over the A7 III, and it's the same for video. Video focus works excellently. It has touchscreen tracking now, it has iFocus tracking, and the performance is fantastic in terms of autofocus. Very welcome change. Not that the A7 III focus system was bad, but this is definitely much better. So the conclusion for me is that it's a fantastic upgrade over the A7 III. It's fixed all the issues I had with it in the past. It still doesn't have the stack sensor like the A1 or the A9, so you're not going to get that true silent shooting out of it, but that's not really a problem for me, even though the mechanical shutter is reasonably loud, but it's not too bad. And yeah, I'm just so happy with this, and I am going to buy one. It may not be the perfect camera if you're doing video, because it does have quite a bit of rolling shutter, but that's really, only if you're moving fast. Like if you're going to do some fast-paced action stuff in terms of video, you're probably better off with the A7S III. For me, it doesn't really matter. I'm not doing that. I'm doing weddings, and I'm never really moving super fast side by side. So that's just my opinion. But yeah, I'm super happy with it, and I am going to buy at least one of these cameras. Not to replace my A9II, but this is fantastic, and yeah, I'm really happy with it. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope I didn't ramble too much. This is more of just a free thoughts opinion piece on this camera. As I said, watch out for the full review once I can edit the files and use it in a real world situation. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.